using the main staircase and using the War Memorial as a muster point at the front of City Hall. Anyone with mobility issues should gather in the foyer on the right-hand side as you leave the Mancroft room near to the balustrade, where assistance will be provided. Toilets are at the far end of the corridors, either side of the council chamber. Ladies to the right as you leave, gents to the left. Members of the committee may use electronic devices to access their meeting papers, and visitors are welcome to use mobile phones and other devices, including cameras, but please use them discreetly, set them to silent, and do not use voice or camera flash functions. This meeting is being live streamed on the council's YouTube channel. So we move on to apologies for this meeting. So we have apologies from councillors Ackroyd and Catt. And we move next to declarations of interest. Councillor Laws.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I need to declare an interest in item 5 on the HMO policy. As an HMO licence holder myself, at that point, I will leave the meeting entirely.
Yeah. Any others? In which case, okay. In which case we move on to the minutes from the Regulatory Committee on the 26th of June this year, 2025. For everybody who was there, can I confirm that's an accurate record? Yes, that's all agreed. Thank you very much. In which case we move on to item 4 of the agenda, the review and amendment of the pavement licensing policy. I'll invite Councillor Giles to speak to this.
Many thanks. So this report covers the City Council's draft pavement licensing policy produced under the Part 1 of the Business and Planning Act 2020, as amended by the Levelling Up and Regeneration Act 2023. So prior to the COVID-19 pandemic, local authorities issued tables and chairs licences under Part 7A of the Highways Act 1980. The Business and Planning Act 2020 was passed in 2020 by Parliament to support licensed premises get through the pandemic for enhanced outdoor dining. The legislative provisions initially had a sunset clause expiring in 2024, but the Levelling Up and Regeneration Act 2023 provided for the reforms to be permanent. Since 2020, the City Council has paid due regard to the Business and Planning Act 2020 Part 1 as amended without updating its local policy. The Levelling Up and Regeneration Act amended the Business and Planning Act 2020 to insert a new section 1A, which increases the fee cap in the Business and Planning Act paragraph C subsection 1 from £100 to £500 for new applications and £350 for renewals. Appendix 1 to the committee report illustrates how the new fee caps will bring us closer to full cost recovery for the service. While appreciating the extra cost this will impose on licensed premises, and this will be regrettable, given the significant budgetary pressures local government faces, it is necessary to seek close to cost recovery for services providing for profit-making businesses. In accordance with other amendments to the legislation, the usual and maximum licence length has been increased from 1 year to 2 years, mitigating the impact of the fee increases to a certain extent. The current 7-day consultation and 7-day determination period has also been increased to 14 days for both. The policy reflects increased enforcement powers for licensing authorities, including explicit recognition of removal/storage/disposal powers for unauthorised furniture at the business proprietor's expense. Licensing advisors will pay due regard to Section 149 of the Equality Act, among other factors as set out in the policy when considering applications. Inclusive Norwich will be a consultee on this draft policy, and I will offer to meet with them during the consultation period to discuss any thoughts and concerns they may have. The legislation does not provide for any statutory right of appeal for pavement licences, which are determined or will be determined under delegated authority. However, our policy does include an internal right of appeal to the head of planning and regulatory services. We welcome comments and questions from the committee. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Giles. I'll now move to any apologies. Do our officers want to say anything beforehand? No. In which case, I will move to any comments, questions, observations from the committee. Councillor Calvert first.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Chair. You mentioned the enforcement power to remove street obstacles, I guess. I presume that applies to all things deposited on the pavement rather than those covered by licenses. Is that, how does that work?
It will just relate to those premises that have got the pavement license.
Oh, wow. Okay. So
yeah, otherwise,
to avoid enforcement, don't get a license.
If they are obstructing the highway, it then becomes a county council function under highways. It's a little bit complicated. But if you've got a license for a pavement, you will have to have a plan to show where your tables and chairs are going, the outline, and there's very strict rules in terms of obstruction of the highway. If they continually breach that plan and that area, we will work with them to support and encourage. But if they continue to breach that, then ultimately we could, if we wanted to, remove and store the furniture.
But only if they have a license. Okay, thanks. I've got a few, if you don't mind, Chair. No, thanks. The 14 days, I think, is welcome. I think that's an improvement, and wider consultation. Currently, as I read it, the consultation involves putting a notice at the site. Are there plans to put them on our website for, you know, wider consultation?
There are plans to have the licenses on our website, similar in the way that we do for the Licensing Act premises applications. So yes, we're working on a digital system to be able to do that through a transformation between what we've got in the digital system to be able to update and publish those on our website. Yes.
And that's applications as well as granted licenses?
Yes.
Okay, that's very welcome. Thank you very much. And finally, I think for me is in the breakdown of costs, firstly, well done for getting it almost to exactly £500. That's top work. But also it says anticipated enforcement costs, and it says 1:5. Is that, what's the meaning of this?
That's 1.5 hours.
1.5 hours.
Yes, it's
brackets 45 minutes.
And the 45 minutes underneath is cost for renewal. So the top figure is new applications, the bottom figure is renewal applications, which is why there's a difference in fees, because it's assuming that renewal applications know that.
Oh, okay. They're twice as likely to be enforced against if they're new applicants.
Potentially.
Okay, sure. No, that's fine. Thank you. That's all I have to ask.
I have Councillor Carrington next.
Thank you, Chair. On page 10 of the report, it mentions that everyone can apply for a licence. I'm assuming you don't mean literally everyone, so I'm just wondering if you could clarify what you mean by everyone, please.
I'm sorry, my page 10 is blank.
Yeah, it's page 10, so the report, page 32 of the overall.
Thank you.
32.
I'll put it.
Last
Okay.
sentence.
Yeah, so everyone has the right. So everyone who runs the type of business that we've described earlier on about who can apply for a license, so everybody has a right to apply for that and for the use of that in England.
Very much. I have Councillor Laws next.
Thank you, Chair. I've just got a question about smoking, basically. A bit of a bugbear of mine. I think it's on page 40 of the agenda pack, page 18 of the appendix 2. The little box at the top that says these are in addition to the national conditions that apply to all granted pavement licenses brackets, no obstruction, smoke-free area, close brackets. I believe I've seen somewhere, possibly in legislation, that there must be at least 2 meters between a smoking and a non. I assume this is smoking and non-smoking, not smoke-free, as in bonfires or whatever. I think there must be at least 2 meters between smoking and a non-smoking area. Where they interface. And I'm just wondering if that could be made a bit clearer, and what the rules are. The rules are about allowing smoking and having clearly defined smoking and non-smoking areas.
Yeah, well, I'll certainly look into making that more clearer.
Are there any other comments, questions, observations? Councillor Stuteley.
Thank you, Chair. The policy refers to inclusive mobility, but it doesn't appear to specify specific measurements. I wondered why that is, and whether we could or should include those measurements as a clear guide for users. Forgive me if I've missed it. I don't have a copy with me. If they are included.
In terms of measurements for the area outside?
Minimum clear, sorry, this is, many of my questions are related to accessibility. So minimum clear pedestrian route around outside areas, and 1.5 metres, 2 metres is general, isn't it? 1.5 metres where physical constraints make it impossible. I just wondered if we could have that in there as a include in the inclusive mobility guidance rather than reference to it.
Yes, that's something we can include. We obviously will be speaking to Inclusive Norwich to get their feedback through the consultation process as well. And as Councillor Giles has said, he's going to be meeting with them to discuss it. So, like I say, this is draft policy, and all consultation responses will be considered.
I might be able to assist with this if you might. Inclusive mobility is a government policy document, which is full of measures and, like, I don't know if you could summarise it very easily. It's quite a big document full of widths and distances.
For the purpose of a pavement licence, I think we can add in the expected widths, and because in the past we've had many applications, and we had a flurry of applications through the COVID period and beyond, and often they were submitted with with measurements much under, and a clear guidance in the policy could have helped us not have quite so many, or at least provide better guidance to those.
That is a good point. And like, while we will have the link to the actual full document, I think I take your point that being more explicit on those dimensions would be useful.
Thank you.
Good.
Bye.
Thank you. Apologies, carry on.
I have a few more, if I may. Yeah, thank you. I wondered if we have or could consider a cumulative impact test, especially for various streets where there are several or many of these pavement licenses. Again, it's from a accessibility point of view. It may not be necessary, but I think it could be something that we should and could consider. It wouldn't be necessary perhaps if our streets are all wide and easily accessible, but we've got some narrow streets with some pavement licenses on them. I just wondered if we could consider assessing the streets that we have to see whether there are any clusters that have a greater impact and therefore greater sensitivity for accessibility.
In terms of an actual cumulative impact policy, I don't think that the legislation doesn't allow for us to do that, but each application would be determined on its merits. So a site visit would be carried out to determine if it was suitable to have tables and chairs outside the premises. Okay,
thank you. Do you receive complaints or concerns from disability groups about our current licence holders?
We've had a few in the last 3 years since I have been at the authority, and what we do is the licence enforcement officers would go out to speak to the premises and licence holders to explain what the issues are, and the businesses have complied with the advice we've given.
Okay, thank you. So largely the licenses are successful in this city. Well, that's good to hear. Okay, just got a couple more. I'll go first to where we're extending licenses to 2 years by default, where they do exceed 12 months. Could we put in an accessibility compliance audit through enforcement or an officer, essentially an inspection to ensure that they're keeping to the requirements?
Yes, we can certainly task the licence enforcement officers to do a review of the licences that we have, and it will be something that we'll be looking to do in the new year.
Okay, thank you. In policy, it mentions that shorter licenses may be issued for good reason. I just wonder what kinds of reasons, and whether we should include those in the policy again for clarity and full guidance.
I don't think it's necessary to include them in the policy, but if, for example, where we're aware of any works going on within a street that would change the characteristic of it, we would generally only issue for a year. But like I say, all applications are considered on the merits, and it would just depend on what is happening within that street, and if we're aware of any issues that may change and make the need to take the tables and chairs licence away because of accessibility issues, for example, or the change in the nature of the road.
Okay, so that could happen as a result of a review or renewal as well. Okay, thank you. Another thing I had, if I may. Yes, I wondered if it's possible to add in restrictions on the type of outdoor heating that our licence holders may use. Is that a possibility? Essentially to encourage low carbon outdoor heating, moving away from gas to less, they're all quite inefficient, but less inefficient, such as infrared heaters. Is that something that we can comply our licence holders to?
I'm not sure we can stipulate what type of heating that they can use outside. We could add it in as a recommendation on licenses or within the policy that they look to using more green and more efficient heating.
Okay, is it possible to look that up and just to see if there is any mechanism for allowing restrictions, please?
At the very least, though, I guess we could go with that option of recommending it if we're not able to do anything.
Yes.
Anything further. Yeah. Thank you. That was all of them. I've
got a couple more, but I'm happy if you can come back to me.
No, feel free. If you want to go through the ones you have, then I'll.
Well, I saw Councillor Calvert put his hand up. I'll just regather my thoughts and come back to you if I may.
Absolutely fine. In that case, can I just say maybe the accessibility compliance point that you raised, Councillor Giles, that might be something that you want to pick up in your consultation. Thank you. Councillor Calvert.
Thank you. I just wanted to make comment actually on the members of the public complaining about pavement licenses. One of the barriers that I personally face and others I know have faced with this is knowing what they've been licensed to do. So if members of the public don't know what the license entitles them to, it's often very hard, or has been very hard in the past, to find out what they've been granted a license to do, and then therefore it makes it very hard to complain, because the first step is to find out what they're allowed to do, and the second step is to then find out if they're doing that thing, and then the third thing is to complain, and it becomes quite laborious, which might explain the small number of complaints. because I know that I've had quite a lot of people complain to me about them, and then I explain how difficult it is, and then essentially they give up. Whereas if we have it online, I think that's allows people to have a look and be like, oh yes, they're not doing the thing they're supposed to be doing, I'll complain. So comment only, I'm afraid, but thank you.
Well, I'd just say, Councillor Gavitt, the intention is that the licensing web access will be the same as planning. It's the same software. That's what we're hoping to bring online by March. And then you'll be able to comment on applications the same as you can on a planning application, but you'll be able to look up what license on what premise is there. So, and it should look and feel exactly the same as planning. That's where we're trying to get to.
That's very positive. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for that. Councillor Stuteley, have you composed your thoughts?
I have. I found the page. Thank you. So the last thing really was about a training for staff. I wondered again if we could add something. It's a recommendation to add that applicants must confirm staff are trained in accessibility requirements, those that have these licenses, to include maintenance of clear footways and safe furniture placement. We require staff training for all sorts of other licenses, so I wondered if we could add this into this policy.
Again, it's something we can consider through the consultation process, yes.
Thank you. And there's one more as well, and that is, if I may, and that is around guidance for noise and antisocial behaviour prevention. Again, it's about strengthening the policy so that there's guidance for licence holders to demonstrate. I've put it, demonstrate reasonable measures to prevent noise, ASB, and nuisance, including signage, staff monitoring, and prompt clearing of tables.
Yeah, happy to consider that as part of the consultation.
Thank you. Would it be helpful if I send these to you on an email with the detail that I've written down as well? Thank you.
For both papers, thank you.
Great, thank you very much. Are there any other questions, comments, observations? Okay, in which case it's recommended that the Regulatory Committee recommend the proposed amendments to the draft Norwich City Council pavement licence policy to Cabinet. Recommend Cabinet to agree to commence a public consultation on the proposed draft policy and fees for an 8-week period. That's from the 19th of January to the 15th of March next year, before returning for formal approval by Cabinet. Is everybody in agreement? Yes, that's unanimous. Thank you very much. That concludes this item. Thank you. Okay, we'll now move on to item 5 on this agenda, HMO policy and introduction of the private sector housing and HMO enforcement policy framework. Am I handing over to Neil?
Good evening, councillors. I've also got Lindsay Brunt with us, who's our recent, rather new HMO and private sector enforcement manager. Apologies for the length of the documents that you've got in front of you. The main part on there is the revised HMO licensing policy, which I believe came to you earlier in the year and has been out for full consultation. As part of bringing this policy back, we've also done a full revision and updated our private sector housing enforcement policy and our civil penalty notice policy, which is why you've got a large suite of documents in front of you. These have all been reviewed with Justice for Tenants and MP Law, our colleagues, to check that they're legally accurate. Justice for Tenants, there was a government grant given to all councils where we got some advice from them built in. they've done a full review of tribunal and upper tribunal cases relating to enforcement and civil penalty notices, and have assisted us to make sure that we've got clear and concise wording that is defendable should we decide to take enforcement action. There's a number of references in there to the reports to the Renters' Rights Bill. That clearly has now become the Renters' Rights Act, so that will be amended prior to us going out of consultation or going on to Cabinet. We also got some feedback about section 4.4 in the HMO policy, talking about the stages of payment, which we will tidy up slightly. So just to be clear, there's a fee on application. Then should the council be minded to grant, then we take a stage 2 payment, and that's to do with licensing law about how that falls. So I think some of the paragraphs have got slightly muddled, but we will clarify that so that's very clear for applicants. I'm happy to take any questions from you about any of the elements on there.
Okay, thank you very much for that. Are there any comments, questions, observations? Councillor Worley-Smith.
Thank you, Chair. So just a couple of things again. My thoughts on everything that I've managed to digest. Pages sort of 71 to 75, there's kind of recurrent mentions of reservations of power to enforce restrictions and extra, what am I trying to say here? Smaller HMOs, basically. At the minute, we don't license anything under 5 people, but we've got the ability to do that if there is evidence to suggest that we need to. What would we consider that threshold? Do we have an idea, and do we need to? Is that deliberately vague so that we can, you know, decide what that threshold is, or is that something that actually would be useful for us to codify and say, actually, this is the kind of the threshold we would meet to say, maybe we think we need to start licensing those smaller properties. Do you want me to go just give you everything, and then I've got 3 things basically.
So I can take them one by one, because
Yeah.
I think that's slightly the introduction of discretionary property licensing, which is you're talking about, which means that we can go to 3 or 4 person HMOs. And also there's potentially, if you can prove a threshold for what they call selective licensing, which is basically single or dual households, so just a flat that's rent. The council's in the process of undertaking full stock condition modelling in the private rented sector. There's slightly different requirements for those 2 types of legislation, sort of 2 tests that you have to meet. We're anticipating receiving our first clarification of that modelling back before Christmas. And I think we'll probably be in a position where we can have a lot more information about our private rented sector as a whole. What is it? Where is it? And some of the pressures that it's causing more widely onto the borough. And I think that will likely to form the subject of an all-member briefing in the new year, is certainly what I'd like to take back. We've had updated deprivation figures that have come out that have been factored into our modelling. You overlay things like ASB, general nuisance complaints, what the impact on the wasting is on a service, and clearly some sort of modelling of what the conditions in those properties are. I've seen a very early draft that we can't share, but I think there's information that councillors would find useful, and that's certainly one of the things that we're looking to see whether we cross the thresholds there. Clearly, the policy in front of you is for what they call mandatory HMOs, which is the above five people, which is national legislation across the country.
Great. Okay, that's brilliant. I look forward to seeing that extra, the extra reports. That sounds incredibly useful stuff to have. So I'm really pleased to hear that's in process. On the fit and proper person processes, we're kind of alluding to the fact that obviously there's a lot of kind of data verification, and there's a lot of work that will go on behind the scenes to cross-reference multiple different sources of information and places that we can find out about the character of a potential license holder. In the same way you've mentioned about us introducing a new platform for the pavement licensing, what's the system for kind of keeping all of this data together for HMOs? Are we happy that that's a robust system that's kind of watertight and You know, we track every communication with license holders, etc. Because I've been in licensing reg subs before where we've had instances. I appreciate that's tax season, something completely different, but we open ourselves up to judicial review when we have these instances of I called and said this and there's no record, and I just want to make sure that we're like belt and braces, we've got a system and it's watertight.
Okay, so Councillor, we've got talking about what we're doing with licensing in general, which will be that we will be able to display HMO licenses in exactly the same way as we do for planning and licensing. We are consolidating onto one platform. I think one of the issues we've had is we've been spread across multiple systems in the same way that we do for planning. So yes, and absolutely any contacts with the landlord will be recorded and we'll be able to recover that. I think in your wider thing about fit and proffer, there are national and other databases and other sources that we can check for issues with known landlords, and particularly we sign up ourselves. If we take certain levels of enforcement action, we enter those details onto the database so they can be looked. Clearly, we speak to colleagues. Under the Housing Act, you're allowed access to various data across the council, but also we're in communications with others as well. So hopefully that answers your question. And yes, in terms of the data integrity, and Lindsay and her team have been going right the way through to make sure that we reconcile a good set. The other thing of interest to us is finding unlicensed properties. So the ones that we know, the people that come forward, oh yes, we have a query of which we've got about 1,000. And we've got them in our inspection regime. It's what are the hidden ones that are due a license that we've got. Part of the stock condition modelling that we've got and the information come forward there that we will actually have access to some property level data, which will help target our enforcement teams rather than just going around. So, and there's a number of other sources that we use to determine what might or might not be one of those premises.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you very much. My final point, if I may, Chair, I may have missed this, but on the fire regulation side of things, the annual fire risk assessment, are landlords required to submit those to us or just have them done?
That's to have them available, so they're expected to do the assessments or employ someone to do the assessments for them, but they must be available if we request them.
Is it worth us adding in to this that we actually once they've done it, they just send it to us, so we've got it on the system and we know it's been done? Could we make that a condition? Because I think that again further impresses the importance of having it done rather than that kind of we want it there if we ask for it.
We have to make sure we administratively can handle it, and when we get to the section when that's organised, it's also part of our audit requirements in terms of prioritising. We would write out and request not just single documents, a few that are there, but we've got in our licence conditions and our regulations, they have to be provided upon request and with a certain period of time. So it's something that we can look at. I wouldn't necessarily want Lindsay's team drowning under a sea of paper that we're going to have to then manually do, but absolutely right. And obviously making sure that we've got the inspection programme. But we want to get our processing team to the stage where if we've automated the process enough that we can actually do some desktop auditing, because that with the intelligence sources feeds to our inspections should be going to the most high risk premises. Things like not having in-date documentation or not being able to provide it to us raises a flag that then Lindsay goes, we're going to inspect you first rather than somewhere else. Yeah.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Yes, I guess that's always going to be subject to resources to something like that. I've got Councillor Carrington next.
Thank you, Chair. On the minimum energy efficiency standards policy, it mentions that there's a high cost exemption. I just would like to know a bit more about why high cost is deemed to be an exemption, bearing in mind the cost cap is set at 3,500, including VAT. Because I mean, on the surface of it, it doesn't really seem like a very fair outcome for tenants. So I also would like to know how that would be mitigated, please.
So councillors, that's what the legislation says. And clearly we have some historic properties and there are reasons there. I would have and I'm sure Lindsay has a personal opinion about that. There's a difference to just being a MEES requirement. We have still got heating. We've got heating requirements and other things that we can impose under the housing legislation, including, if it's not sufficient, correct me if I'm wrong, Lindsay, but the means of heating provided, there's tribunal case law that has to be reasonably priced and can't be excessive for the tenant. And if we were in there and we were looking at things like damp and mould, or there was reasons that it couldn't be heated properly or it was causing health problems, then we take actions, but not necessarily under MEES. We would take that under our housing powers.
Thank you for that. I've got Councillor Maguire next.
Thank you, Chair. Now, as this begins to be run out and come into being, slowly, hopefully, we will get rid of the worst of HMOs, and the demand on staff will be less. But at the moment, where you come across or receive complaints of the conditions of HMOs, certainly, actually I've not enforced HMO legislation in Norwich. I used to in City of Westminster. This was a long time ago, but it was very time consuming. And I just want some kind of reassurance that we've considered properly the capacity requirements during this quite heavy period before hopefully we transition to a more ordered period with the regular inspections on the licensing.
So, Councillor, yes, we've got some additional posts that have been gone into Lindsay's team. We've got some interim support. I think from our point of view, there's benefits to licensing in that we can do, once you've got someone with a series of conditions, we can then do a compliance check to say you're keeping to your conditions, rather with your experience than having to do a full HHRS, sorry, it's a health and housing risk assessment. It basically becomes your set of conditions is the list of things that you need to comply with. The civil penalty notice means that if you don't, and you don't do what we tell you, you get a financial fine, which is easier than us having to take a prosecution, which, as you know, will be very timely, very expensive and time consuming, and actually will probably end up in a tribunal in months or potentially years' time. So we can take quicker decisive action, which is better for the residents. We are aware we've obviously got the Renters' Rights Act coming down through the legislation, and this suite will be updated because we're going to get ongoing statutory guidance. We're waiting for the full timetable of that. But this will allow us to take swifter and quicker action in terms of that. The discussions that we've just had in terms of our HMOs that we've got, we clearly want to prioritise those according to risk. So that's the state of the condition. If we've got an individual landlord that is having issues in one property, that's an indicator to us that we might want to go and look at the other. There are other solutions like that between us taking enforcement action or actually saying what you need here is a professional property manager because it's not working the way it's going. And then, you know, we move on to the fit and proper type arguments that we've had before. So absolutely, but we need to do these on a risk basis. We've got our databases in much better order than it has been for a long period of time. We've been catching up with the proactive inspections. We're looking at additional resource. I'd really like to give that a really big push so that we're actually ahead of the game in terms of where we are. But actually the ones that we're most concerned about, the most high risk, get either one or more inspections. I'd rather go to one that was poor multiple times than go. But again, I think the thrust of these policies is that actually if we have to get involved in the management of somebody else's premises, then they have to pay. What we would rather do is that people comply, and actually what can we do to lift the borough and the private rented sector, of which we estimate now there's over 20,000 properties out there. What can we do to the big lift? And actually some of the protections under the Renters' Rights Act with it shouldn't be the onus on the tenant who's fearful of making a complaint, that we've got rights to go in and have a look ourselves without a complaint being made.
Just come back quickly and say I'd like to think that certainly this committee would support that more statutory process driven approach, because the plagues in the past have been of informal arrangements that never quite come to fruition. So I hope we can at least commend that approach.
Well, thank you very much, Councillor. And I think the thrust of the documents that are in front of you today is to give Lindsay's team the tool to give, the tools to do the job. We've got nice, well out, legally tight enforcement policies and up-to-date policies. That means there's less wriggle room for someone to try and get out of something, or we'd much rather people comply than we're having a battle in a tribunal further down the line. I mean, that's what we're really trying to do, is protect residents.
Thank you. I must say, I think for this committee, it will be extremely welcome to see that there's a sort of avenues for enforcement being explored here. Can I perhaps ask, where are we at currently in terms of figures with sort of how enforcement is currently running?
Have you got the summary there? So we're
for the HMO enforcement and HMO licensing.
Yeah, I mean, I think we've had some previous issues. We're up to, well, the last figures, which are slightly out of date, which we can move up to do, is that we've got 5-year licenses. Our intention will be to visit all of those during the course of their license. Any high risk ones are visited before the license is issued. We're at 25%, obviously 20% if you think we're going to do one in every 5 years. We're trying to give that a big boost with some interim resources to drive that one up. We've got approximately 1,000 licenses. It fluctuates about that. It goes slightly down and then slightly up in terms of what's, in terms of what they're. So, and we're about, the ones that we've got, we're about 99% in terms of statutory compliance.
Thank you very much. Councillor Stukeley.
Thank you. Thank you for the report and all the work that's gone into this. I think it is a massive improvement on where we were only a few years ago. And you've spoken about resources at some length. So I had a few questions about it, which have all been answered, I think, but got a more general question, which is, do you have enough resources, in your opinion, at your disposal now to get this right? And are the fees satisfactory? Would you benefit from more resources initially or long term? I suppose the question is, how can this committee help you to get the work done?
So thank you, Councillor. You can recommend the policies for approval, would be a great help in terms of getting a statutory. We've got the first indications of what new burdens funding will be for the Renters' Rights Act requirements that are coming in. The licensing fee covers pretty much the work we're doing. What we're trying to do is work to make the service more efficient. I think the IT improvements that we come and the use of desktop audits and the ability for us to risk assess much better. And Lizzie's team are working hard and working to standardise processes. We really, civil penalty recovery, that money is ring fenced for us to use on our housing work. So we need to get, we've got a nice smooth process and we start getting those in. There's always more. We've got requests for grant. You could give us as much as you want. There is a bit of a problem out there with getting qualified housing professionals. That there's a market, and we're looking at different routes to entry, so we can build apprentices up. We need a mix between, really experienced staff and other staff that we can bring on. We need to make sure that our most experienced staff are doing inspecting a 6-storey HMO is a complicated piece of work with some severe risk there to assess the thing. Dealing with some of the other complaint work, obviously we don't need an officer qualified to that level. We've got a growth requirement in for next year in terms of that. Obviously that will be countersunk with what we're getting in terms of new burdens funding. One of the issues will be whether we've got the money. We've got posts, is who can we recruit to, because everybody's in the same position. We had a bit of a discussion earlier about discretionary property licensing. I mean, one of the benefits of that to the council is that is self-funding and therefore can fund a bigger team for us to go out proactively and look at another range of premises. I think my concerns would be making sure we can adequately identify the ones that haven't got a license, because even the ones that license say we've got people in compliant and we've got a set of conditions, we don't have to give the same notice to go in, and Lindsay's team can take quicker and faster action. It will be those unlicensed ones, and as we've talked about, I think we've got potential risk areas in our smaller 3 to 4 ones. We all know with the cost of living crisis out there, and actually there's pressure on landlords to obviously maximise the income on their properties, and there's pressure on tenants to have more in a property that maybe is not designed or particularly safe for having that many. I think there's quite an element of, we've got 2-bedroom properties where a third person has gone into a lounge, which not necessarily a problem, but in terms of welfare, but things like fire separation and how that's working or how it's being managed is concerned. Sorry, that was a very long answer to yes, we've got. Yes, we've got plans. We've got a growth item in for next year, which I know members are looking on favourably. We've got the new burdens funding. We're looking at other sources of income, but I think there's bigger things that we need to be thinking about.
Thank you. I like detailed answers. I appreciate that. It's good to hear that you're considering apprenticeships within the council for this, and absolutely support that. I mean, I've got a long history of requesting resources for this department, and I'll continue to do that until I think we're fully satisfied that we have enough and we're on top of it. I suppose a question related to that is, are you satisfied that a largely reactive approach to enforcement is going to be adequate for this council, knowing the properties that we've got? And after you answer that, I'll just talk, if I may, about the smaller HMOs as well.
So I would hope we're moving away from total reactive. I think we're moving to proactive for the ones that we know, and trying to separate out an enforcement stream that's using intelligence on where we go, and obviously keeping up with the inboxes for the complaints. So this is the work that Lindsay's trying to do in terms of streamlining the way we work. We're looking at the structure of the team to how can we separate that so we can make sure our compliance element, which is people complying with licensing, is separate to our reactive work where we receive complaints coming in, and also the intelligence related work where we're doing specific project work to go out and look for those premises. So I think it probably has been a balance where we've been reactive. I think we're trying to switch that dial. Obviously, I think everybody, all housing colleagues are conscious of quite what the demand's going to be about renters' rights. We have created a new post, and we have, starting in January, we've the interviews for a tenant and landlord engagement officer, so we can start doing more enforcement action around tenants' rights, particularly because that's a big area of work where the team, as we can go in and deal with property details, but actually the behaviour. But we also need to be engaging with our good landlords to make sure they're aware of the standards, that they can drive them up. We can build trust with them, because actually they're some of the best people. The good landlords and agents are some of the best sources of intelligence to us about who's not doing it properly or what's going on. And I think we need to build up that, we need to build that trust. It's not, I think we need to get away in the modern world from everybody's a rogue landlord. I think there's different profiles on that. We want professionally managed properties that are out there. There are some criminal landlords. They're a very small percentage, but we don't want them in Norwich, and we need to be, Lindsay's team need to have the intelligence on that to focus down on them, and we'll just drive them out of the business.
Thank you. Councillor Stuteley.
Thank you. That's really good to hear. If I could just go back to the prospect of additional licensing for smaller homes for 3 to 4 persons, or perhaps smaller than that. You mentioned those properties in Norwich, and I think all councillors, most councillors, will have them in their wards. The Victorian terraced houses, largely 2 up, 2 downs, where they have 3 persons, one in a bedroom downstairs. We know that there are lots of them, and there are especially many in the Golden Triangle and Silver Triangle areas of the city, and arguably they could be just as badly affected by issues as any of the larger properties. So therefore, I would like this committee to officially support the work of the council to undertake or complete the review of those properties and officially support landlord licensing, please. If we could form that into some sort of words for the committee to support, I'd be very grateful.
Do you have a suggested form of words for that?
I could come up with something if somebody else has another question.
Yes, indeed. Did you want to come back to any of that first?
I would just say, councillors, I'm happy. As I said, I think we'll be aiming to do an all councillor briefing in the new year. I'd happily bring a report back to this committee in terms of when we've got to rooms to talk about that. I think the council has to make a consideration that we can say we've got concerns about the rented sector and we'll be looking for more control. But I think you have to do that on the basis of looking at the evidence. As you're aware, it's quite it's a statutorily laid out process about how the council goes on that and things that we have to prove. I think I mean, it's entirely up to you how you recommend it. I just think the recommendation is that you would seek more controls, and then we'll bring a paper back with the options, which will go to a variety of committees.
Thank you for that. I would just like to say I think that what's being proposed here does allow for a good degree of proactivity, and I would very much sort of see this as what this council should be doing, making life better for people who are renting properties. I just wanted to pick up on the use of the word rogue. I wonder about this. Part of what's meant by it is 15th century cant. If you sort of look back into it, it's largely around playful mischief, and I feel that we're dealing with people who are sort of behaving far worse than something playful or mischievous here. It's often criminal what's going on, and some of the conditions that residents have to live in are appalling. If this gives us any opportunity of responding to that extremely robustly with landlords, then I think this is to be supported. It's a very positive move. Councillor Stuteley, I see you're still scribbling there. Do you have a form of words?
Yes, I was going to suggest something along the lines of this committee supports the work of the licensing department in gathering evidence for to move towards additional licensing for smaller HMOs and individual properties. Something along those lines. Perhaps somebody could help me with that.
Careful of anything that suggests we know where we're going and we're on the way to get there.
Could I perhaps suggest that in that regard, we wait until we've had that members briefing, and then perhaps pick this up at a subsequent committee? Would that be appropriate, Councillor Stuteley?
Yes, I tried. Thank you.
Councillor Maguire, did you want to come in?
Well, actually, David made the point I was going to make, that when you gather evidence, you look across the board. You don't just adduce evidence that's going to support your view. That's not good evidence gathering. So yeah, gather evidence, but not anticipate your finding. It's a bit like saying the outcome of my experiment is this, and before you do it, you don't.
Councillor Stuteley.
Just to follow up from that, and also actually what David said, I accept that we can't necessarily be predetermined, but we have heard a great deal of evidence already that the the city and large parts of the city will meet the criteria, at least for area specific HMO licensing. So, and we know that many of the licensed properties are the ones that we described, where there's three separate people living in one household. So that the evidence is already there to support it. We just have to jump through the right hoops in order to meet that statutory test. But from a council point of view, there's no reason why we shouldn't support landlord licensing and smaller HMOs. I certainly do.
Thank you very much for that. As I suggested, perhaps the option here would be to pick this up after the briefing has taken place at a further committee meeting. Does that sound appropriate for people? Perhaps just to be clear, if we are taking a vote on this, then who would be happy for that to be picked up after the briefing? All those against? And abstentions? Okay, that's the way we'll proceed then. Thank you very much. Councillor Studley.
I'd just like to clarify my position that I support landlord licensing where the evidence indicates that it is a necessary advancement in policy. Thank you.
Thank you for that clarification. Are there any further comments, questions or observations? Okay, in which case, so it's recommended that this regulatory committee approve the updated houses of multiple occupation HMO policy. Note that the amendments made to the HMO policy ensure statutory compliance following legal review by MP Law, and to endorse the implementation of the private sector housing and HMO enforcement framework, which provides the underpinning policy suite, ensuring that all enforcement activity is legally compliant, proportionate and consistent. So we'll move to vote on that. All those in favour? And that's unanimous. Thank you very much, everybody. That concludes everything for this regulatory committee. Thank you.